Hello, welcome back to Stained Glass for Beginners. Today's project, we've got the candy stained glass right here. Of course, this is the week 3. Last week we made the Husky. The week 1 was the Dove. And so today's project is that candy stained glass, the week 3 of the May stained glass kit. Again, as always, the first thing we're going to want to do is put on our apron. And let me know in the chat if everyone can hear me. And of course, if you have been here before, let me know in the stream chat here. I'd like to hear from you. And so today we are doing this candy stained glass. So here is the pattern for today that we are working with. And you can do this a few different ways. I was originally intending on using this white glass to kind of do the red and white kind of typical candy shape there. And I decided to go ahead and do it with this other glass that comes in the kit instead. I think it'll be a little bit more visually appealing, and we'll use the white still on the outside for the wrapper. So again, thank you very much for being here today. And Cindy, hey, thank you for confirming that you can hear me through the chat there. Thank you for joining us also. Good to see you again. All right, so for today, we are going to go ahead and get started cutting our glass as always. Again, we are going to be using the white glass with the wrappers here. So there is no direction on this white glass, so we can pretty much put it at any point that's going to give us the best glass cutting yield. So we're going to kind of stick these down, see how we do here. And I hope everyone is having a great Sunday today. So this is the vinyl adhesive backed pattern here. And this is, again, part of our Stained Glass Mastery community, free Stained Glass Mastery community, where we've got tons of free resources and of course all the free patterns for these projects that we do every week. And if you are interested in doing this exact kit along with me, we do sell it as a kit for every month. So each month there are 4 glasses, and with these 4 glasses we will make 1 pattern each week. And that is a pretty nice value. There's a little discount compared to buying it normally. And of course, you're able to follow along with me as we are doing the projects each week. So for this one, I'm going to be doing alternating. And you do need to probably be a little bit careful here, because I'm going to go ahead and number these as well as I can. I'll name this as number 1. So that way I will put them in the right spot. And I believe it's symmetrical, perfectly symmetrical, but you are going to want to make sure that when you put it back, the shapes fit properly in case there is any variance. Now, important thing, what I am going to do here is also mark for the direction. Since this other glass here, it's kind of got this some violet and white streaks in it and everything. It is pretty directional, so we are going to want to go ahead and stay consistent with that. Now, I am going to want to also look at this glass on both sides, and you can see they're pretty different. So the viewing side that you're going to want to be looking at, you're going to want to make sure that it is the side that you are interested in. And actually, I'm interested in the back side. This glass is from Oceanside, and it's actually their pale purple white, but I really want it to be mostly these white streaky bluish colors for this particular pattern. So we are going to continue on here. Again, we are keeping the direction. This is predominantly this direction, and I'm actually going to use this side of the sheet because it's got a lot of those kind of vertical streaks there. So I think that's going to give us a pretty good outcome. And so we are going to want to alternate these. So we're doing the number 1 piece. We're going to do the number 3 piece, keeping that direction the same as marked and the number 5 piece. And this way, it will be exactly what we want to see. And then this red glass, it has a slight direction also in the texture. So this one, it's a water gloss, and the texture is kind of this way. You can kind of see it in the reflection of the light right here in this area. So we are going to want to do that in the same way. So I'll probably just set it up exactly like I did here. And then we will get to cutting our glass. And if you have been to the live streams before, then you're probably going to recognize a pretty familiar format here, where we will be, of course, putting the patterns down, cutting the glass, grinding, foiling, and then we will be soldering. And hey, Jack, thank you for joining us. Good to see you. All right. So it doesn't really matter which color you start with. I'll probably start with the white glass just to get it out of the way. And what I'll normally do is cut the piece off with all the patterns like this. And when I break it, I normally use my hands if it's big enough. And kind of like a piece of dark chocolate or the Kit Kat, you kind of have that force in the left and right direction. And I like to separate all of the patterns from the rest of the glass because we don't want to be wasting a lot of our glass. We want to make sure that we have enough glass for the future projects. So I like to separate the pieces I know I'm going to need. And this glass, it's kind of a dense glass. So what I do is I tap the score from the bottom, and that helps to just separate it just enough to be able to separate the glass along that score easier instead of kind of putting a little too much strain on my hands and risk cutting myself. So that's why I do that. And we're going to go ahead and move on to the red glass here. So same thing. This one will be a little bit easier to break probably because the curve is a little bit less sharp. It's a little bit more gradual. So I didn't need the tapping on that one. And so now this is pretty much going to be creating our overall piece here. Make sure that overhead camera is focused nicely. There we go. All right, so we've got the red glass here that we're going to start with. So we'll go ahead and cut this down. And what I'll normally do is we want to separate these because we don't want to be, cutting into our pieces and making a bit of a mess and having to recut more pieces from our bigger piece. So we're going to try to separate this. These kind of interior curves here can be a little bit tricky to get on the first try, but if you kind of tap it through, take your time, that's normally how I manage to do it. This denser glass we're definitely going to be needing to tap through. I'm not even going to try. And we can kind of take a little bit of a closer look here. So again, we are trying to just lightly tap from the bottom. And this shape is a little bit, got that curve. And thank you, Homemade and Cindy, for letting me know that. And hey, Mary, thanks for joining us also. So I'm just trying to tap it through. It looks like it might break through this piece. Looks like it's running off that score a little bit. Yeah, it definitely is. If you look closely right here, it's supposed to be kind of following here, and it's starting to run off. So I'm going to go ahead and separate this like that, and we're just going to cut a new piece. and it's not the end of the world. I might even be able to get it. Yeah, I can. If I just reposition this one, we're going to be able to get that to work. So I'm going to put this a little bit further down on this piece. And then, there we go, just like that. So occasionally you might have to reposition some pieces. And so I'm going to go ahead and separate this a little bit of a safer way, instead of trying to cut that real tight curve there. There we go. So now we just need to separate our white glass and we will move on to cutting everything. And sometimes you can, while you're separating, also cut one of the lines. But if it's going to kind of compromise the cut, you may want to avoid it. You know, if it's going to end up causing you to break into another piece, you don't want to do that. But most of these seem to be pretty isolated, so these pieces like this, that should not be a problem. And something like this. There we go. So when we are cutting, it is just some nice, consistent, pretty strong pressure, not too hard. And you're probably going to want to make sure your glass cutter is oiled up. I normally keep the oil in the sponge in a little plastic bottle, and that works pretty good. And let's see here. So we are now ready to pretty much go through and cut everything out. Now, the vinyl pattern is going to give us a nice guide to use for our glass cutter. And when it gets kind of small like this, it's really hard to grab with your hands. I end up using the Grosier's with the flat end on top. See the flat and the curved side? So I'll use the flat end on top, a little bit of pressure, and it breaks it off really nicely also. So all the glasses that we're using here are relatively smooth. There is a water glass, but even that one is pretty smooth too, so we're not too worried about that. And we are going to go ahead and cut all of our pieces and then get to grinding. So we got the first one cut. Go ahead and make a little bit of space here. And this is probably not a complete beginner, but probably not one of the harder patterns. It's got some, you know, kind of tighter radiuses on these candy pieces like these that you're going to need to take a little bit more time, and we're going to go through a few tricks today on how to kind of cut those a little bit safer, not to be breaking into your workpiece there. So we will do all of that here shortly. And as you cut your glass, you will get some little glass shards. And I personally keep my table brush by. I just sweep them all off. I can already start to feel them poking me here. So we'll make sure to get those out of here. And that will make your experience a lot more enjoyable. I think, anyway. At least for me, that's the case. All right. And of course, as usual, if you have any questions, please be sure to ask them in the chat. We'll be sure to answer them in real time as you ask them. So sometimes it ends up getting a little bit chewed up like that, but we will be taking care of all that on the grinder very soon. So the grinder, it is definitely one of those tools I recommend you purchase. I pretty much use it every single time we're doing a project. And if you plan to do quite a few of them, definitely recommend getting one. Pretty good cut there. So again, these particular shapes are pretty simple to cut. So far, we have started with the easiest ones, to be fair. So we will see shortly what we are in store for. And it is summertime. I hope everyone is enjoying the, well, pretty much summertime. It's about there. Well, we're about mid-May now. Starting to get warm, that's for sure where I'm at, here in Texas. We were hitting a few 100-degree days last week, and I'm sure for this coming week. Good swimming weather. Get a tan. And maybe even have some candy, like our stained glass we are doing today. And of course, this is the week number 3. We do have one more week after this one. It will be our week 4. I believe it's a shell, which is good for summertime. Got the beach, sea vibe situation going on with that. So it's a good time for a seashell for those that will be visiting the beaches at some point this summer. So here is our first one with this kind of interior radius. Now what I like to do for these to make it a little easier is I will cut a shallower radius, 1 or 2 inside of here, and just slowly chip those out, and it will get us closer and closer to our destination on the pattern. And Jack asked a question. I've been using push pins recently to measure gaps, but I'm unsure if this is a good method. What do you think? I personally don't worry about the gaps too much. I try to have as little of a gap as possible. But as I like to say, don't let the gap police get to you. So if you have a little gap, the width, the diameter, I should say, of a pin needle, I think you're definitely all right. If it is glass on glass, I think you are all right for these pretty small sun catchers. Now for something larger, the point of failure normally is not somewhere in the runs of the solder. It's normally on the hanging mechanism, the mounting method. So if you put a tiny little jump ring that's not really reinforced, it's probably going to fail there. But if you put a pretty, healthily submerged jump ring into some solder in a strong location, like on a joint, then you're going to have a much better chance if you're making a bigger panel, which I know you do, Jack. So for those, you're definitely going to want to, even if it's a really weak point where a very small amount of solder is touching, then you might have to even reinforce that with some wire. And because that is where it's going to fail. So what I mean by that is if you have a bunch of pieces all grouped together right here, let's say this was much larger, and then you have a very small connection to another large group of pieces over here. Well, this spot that connects them all is going to be a weak point, and you might want to put some wire through here or something to reinforce it a little bit better, especially on that location. But as far as gaps, as long as they're not like a 1/4 inch or something, personally, I think you're all right. 1/4 inch is pretty big. I would say even personally an 1/8 inch is probably pretty big. But Yeah, definitely an 1/8 inch is pretty big. I mean, even a 16th inch feels like a, pretty big gap. I try to get them as tight as possible together, unless, one of the other aforementioned situation is occurring with the need to have a pretty healthy reinforcement. Which personally, if you are getting to the point where you are making bigger panels instead of more of Suncatcher type, you really should maybe consider making the transition over to using leaded glass, which really is not meant to hang whatsoever. It's more meant to be mounted inside of another window frame or a wooden frame. And it's just the, it's a more traditional method than used for hundreds. I don't know if it's thousands, but, definitely hundreds plus of years in church windows. And so that, if you're starting to make them where they're too big, beyond Suncatcher sort of consideration, I would start to look into that a little bit more. Which for the purpose of this, the weekly live streams, we don't really have a whole lot of time to be doing something big like that. So the copper foil really is more of an ideal medium for our purposes here. Now, I do have a lot of videos on the Mr. Stained Glass YouTube channel, with leaded glass style content, including how to make them. I've got one video on that, one or two. And so if you're interested, I would check that out. And thank you for your question, Jack. I hope I answered it all right. Probably a little bit of rambling going on there on my end. Oops. Broke this piece. Broke off this corner a little bit. I think we're going to be okay. A little bit of that corner popped off, but it's not too bad. As long as that's the only part, I think we're good. This particular gloss, it is a little bit dense. It's noticeably denser. And I keep saying this every week. I need to grab myself another pair of Grosing pliers, because sometimes it can get a little bit tricky when you're holding a sharp, pointy piece like this and you're trying to open that up. Yeah, Jack, yeah, I think that personally, I think you're overthinking it. And I mean, I've got a bunch of these little panels hanging and, back behind me, and I don't ever worry about the gap. There are some here and there. I don't worry about making them bigger, and I don't worry about, I try to close them up as much as possible. I think that gives you the cleanest, most consistent look. Now, when I do score these, I personally prefer to do all the scoring first and then go back and break out all the glass. So I'm going to actually cut this one a little bit shallower. It'll just make it a little bit easier on this really dense glass that we're using. There we go. Hoping that happens for the bigger piece, but we'll take it down in pieces too. I'll accept that. Just like that. But yeah, Jack, there is a little bit more of safety, consideration with the leaded glass, because it is a lead. So we normally wear the blue nitrile gloves whenever we're working with it. I mean, I have seen some people on YouTube that they don't even wear gloves at all. You can see their fingers are all black from handling that material. And I personally don't think it's a good idea to do that. And we don't. We've got several craftsmen. Of course, we would we'd be horrified if we see them working like that. So And of course, in case you don't know me, my name is Adrian. I'm a part of the Cavallini Stained Glass Studio, and we work on hundreds of stained glass windows every year. So that's what we do, and that's why I think you can trust me to help you out here today. So we've got the purple white glass cut. Now we are onto the reds here. And this one I think is going to be a little bit easier because it is a lot thinner. And of course, if you are having really big trouble with that purple white gloss, it is pretty dense. It's a nice gloss. Might have been, you know, the glosses are different, different runs, and they're batches, if you will. And so all the batches are a little different. I might have gotten one that was just a little bit denser and harder to break maybe than most of them. But if that does happen to you, you can, of course, switch it out for the white glass. You can do the red and white like a typical candy look. Or you can, you know, you got plenty of glass to keep trying until you get it. So it's all about patience and, of course, practice. No amount of watching other people do it's really going to get you there. You're going to have to, you know, get your hands into it and see how it really, really is. All right, got that first piece. And occasionally I actually almost sweep off some of these pieces that I'm intending to cut, so be sure when you're sweeping your workspace off not to do that. I bet you might have done that in the past if you do a lot of work with the gloss. All right, we've got one more here. And this one is just much easier to cut. Even though it's the exact same shape. All right, we've got our last piece cut here. And now it is time to move on to the grinding. And the grinder, it does get wet, of course. And so you do need to be a little bit careful whenever you are grinding these glasses with the pattern on it, not to get it too saturated with water, because you can end up making the pattern fall off. But if you're pretty careful and kind of just putting the water not directly onto the grinder and the glass, and it's just sort of feeding the water onto the wheel here, then you're going to be all right, I think. So all you do is push that glass into the wheel. See if I can give you a better angle here. And bringing that wheel all the way to the white of the pattern. And once you grind down to it, you know your piece is going to fit very well. And you do kind of have to push in on the edge of the glass. So when you do that, you know, just be kind of careful not to cut yourself. Wear gloves if you need to. And here in just a moment, we are going to be looking at what this looks like. Without the patterns, we can kind of see the colors all together, and that'll kind of give us an idea of the first look of what the stained glass looks. And again, Jack, thanks for joining us today. All right. And you can see all the little red glass dust there starting to accumulate. And these patterns just make this process really go by. Really takes a lot of the guesswork out. And that's why I really enjoy these vinyl patterns for these. And if you want, you can actually purchase these independently of the glass kit, say if you have your own glass. And we will be lowering the price soon and adding in free shipping. So that will be on the lookout for that, in case you want to do some of these projects with the patterns. And we do sell all of these materials on our website at cavalliniglass.com. I'll go ahead and link this in the shopping here on the YouTube video. And also we've got all sorts of links and resources in the community where you can purchase my recommended tools and pretty much everything you see here that I use here to make all of the stuff we see in the videos. So that is a good place to start if you are a brand new beginner. If you are looking for a little bit of a lower barrier to entry price, you can look on Facebook Marketplace for some other people who are maybe no longer doing stained glass, or occasionally there will be people who have passed away that have a lot of stained glass stuff, glass tools, etc. And normally, the family member of the deceased is trying to move all this fragile glass, and you can get a pretty good deal. So look out for that, and you might get lucky. And if you have done one of these patterns before, let me know which one has been your favorite so far. I think for me personally, I really enjoyed doing the husky. And we do have many more animals planned out. And dogs specifically, I know we've got a golden retriever at some point planned in there. What else do we have planned in there? I think we have a few dogs planned in there. Some other, maybe like a beagle type, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, let me know which one has been your favorite so far. And hey, Lily, thank you for joining us. And Lily mentioned that she can hardly wait to get back to doing the glass work, although I feel silly calling it work. It is such a joy. Right on, Lily. And you're definitely in the right place if you are calling it a joy in lieu of work. To many, it can feel a little bit tedious, but if you really enjoy creating and art in general, it kind of transcends that into a joy, exactly like you mentioned. So good to see you. Thank you for joining us today. And we've got a few more pieces to grind here. Now the next step after we are done grinding, we are going to need to clean up all this glass debris from the grinder, and that will help us to have the copper foil stick very nicely, because otherwise you're going to have a little bit of a problem. getting that copper foil to stick and ultimately have problems later on in the project. And hey, Rory, thank you for joining us. I appreciate that. And Homemade mentioned that their favorite was a bird from a couple weeks ago. That would be that dove that we did, the white dove. Yeah, that was a pretty good one. That was from the week 1 of the May kit. And with that is our last piece of the grinding. So we are now ready to move on to the cleaning up here. And what I think I'm going to go ahead and do is, what I like to do is to try to save these as much as possible. So I will kind of put it back into the pattern, because just in case I'm able to save it and use it again, I would like to. Now, I'm not guaranteeing it'll work multiple times, but it might have enough adhesion, and you also might be able to simply glue it down with a little glue stick. Something like that would probably work too. So just something to consider. And this time I am keeping the pattern on. I'm trying to just fit it right in where it sort of was before we took it out. It's not going to be perfect, but it'll be close enough, I think, that it'll work out. And Lily mentioned that creating with glass is magical, and certainly it has a unique appeal that other art forms really don't have to the same degree, because it interacts with light differently, where the light, it's one of the only the only art mediums where light isn't just reflected off of it like in a painting, but it is actually through it. So that is kind of one of the main appeals of stained glass that is unique to others. And hey, Ella, thank you for joining us. Good to see you again. And we are making some good progress here. And I can barely read my own handwriting, as is typical. And you can see all these pieces. They're pretty much going back where they were. So that's working out pretty well. And we can see our little candy starting to appear here. And I'm sure we've got some candy lovers here today. Let me know what your favorite is. Probably for me, it would have to be the Reese's, the king size. I am notorious for getting those on a long drive. And it just seems to take a lot of the time out of the drive. That's what I noticed anyway. Having a little Reese's Pieces. And we can kind of see what we're looking at. Coming together pretty nicely so far. Oops. And looks like I might be missing a piece around here somewhere. Let's see. There it is. It's hiding from me. Underneath the pattern there. All right. So we pretty much got our first pieces cut here. Oops, there we go. So it's like something's off. There we are. Okay, now we are ready to get to cleaning them up. We've got our directional sort of shooting out from the middle. And Lily mentioned her favorite will be the Tootsie Rolls. Those are pretty good too. And Ella mentions that she loves how it will look one way when not lit up. And then the colors are beautiful once the sun is shining through. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, it does make it hard to show the true beauty of photographing. That's right. Yeah, it is very tricky to get the photographs. Normally what I'll do, at least on my phone, when I like to try to take some pictures, is it has a setting where I'm not sure if it's a darkness, brightness, or if it's something to do with shutter speed or what really is going on. But I can adjust it to, it's like darkening everything except for that stained glass for whatever reason. And it seems to come out the best, the truest in colors. And if for whenever I need to take a picture of a window, if I want to include the surrounding areas, I'll take two pictures, one with just the stained glass showing well when I adjust that brightness setting, and then one with the sort of window frame and the wall and around it and all that showing well. And then I can Photoshop the window into the other picture, and then that's normally how I'll get kind of a decent looking picture that shows both the the area around the window and the window itself, because otherwise it's actually pretty much impossible. I mean, there might be some super expensive camera and some photography wizardry that I'm unaware of, but and probably there is, to be honest. Fortunately, I haven't quite stumbled upon that solution. But it is a problem trying to photograph stained glass sometimes. And I personally find that whenever it's a bit more of an overcast day, it seems to come out just a little bit more evenly, and it works out a little bit better compared to if it's really sunny. You kind of can get some weird bright spots, light spots compared to the other areas. It's not quite truly depicting what it looks like. But other than that, we are making some good progress today. We've got our glass cut, and now we are removing all the glass dust. You can see all that dust that is just coming right off the edges here. And at least for my phone, I have a Samsung phone, and when I tap the screen, it sort of has a little brightness indicator that I can adjust lower or higher, and that's it's pretty easy on my end for that. If you've got an iPhone, I'm not too sure how to do it from an iPhone. I'm sure it's possible somehow. I'm just not too sure how, to be honest. And Lily mentioned that her favorite quote is, "People are like stained glass windows. They sparkle and shine when the sun is out, but when the darkness sets in, their true beauty is seen only if there's a light from within." And that is a nice quote. I know with the stained glass, really the only windows you see in low light is the opaque glass. You see a lot better. The transparent glass, not so much. And Ella, with the S24 Ultra, that should work. That should work. I think I have the exact same phone, actually. And actually, I might have an S20-something, like an older one. 20-something Ultra. And yeah, if you tap your finger on the screen on the window, and then it should have the little indicator, you can go left or right, and that will pretty much do that adjustment for you right there. And you'll see what I mean, where it kind of darkens everything except for that really bright, the stained glass. It looks almost very washed out when you try to take it with just a normal camera setting, because the phone is, the camera's trying to capture the most it can. It's sort of auto-adjusting to accommodate for the wall brightness, because that's what most of the picture looks like. But if you want to capture that one little stained glass, it will look all bright and washed out, if you will. Yeah, give that a try. I think you'll be happy with the results there. And with that, we've pretty much got our last piece all cleaned up here. And we are ready to move on to the foiling. All right. I'm going to set this pattern aside for the moment, and we're probably going to, let's see here, bring out the foiler here, and we're going to switch over to the free camera, and we're going to give you a pretty good angle here so I can show you what we're doing. So for this project, again, the black-backed copper foil, you can see here, it's got the black backing. I'm going to pull a little bit out, and I am going to cut it down. And I'm going to get this backing out of your way. Hopefully that will work out like that. I'm going to move this over just a little bit more. And so here you can see it's got this little groove right here. And that's where the gloss will insert into. And it will just apply right on that edge. And you can just kind of push that glass edge into that foil. And it will just apply. It separates that backing here off camera. You can't really see that. And with this groove, it centers that glass nicely. So I don't really do any hand foiling unless I absolutely must. I'm not saying that's necessarily the best place to start. You know, if you're trying to get started, you may want to just get started, and that's fine. You don't need to set up anything. But my personal preference is to use this foiler mounted onto this board. And then I just house all of that foil in the blue caddy. And just like that, it works out really easily. There we go. And with that, you've got a nice even reveal on both sides. And we still need to burnish it, so I'm going to set this aside for the moment, and we will burnish when we are ready. Now this is maybe one of the only downsides to this foiler, is that this glass, it's just a little bit thicker. That's why it was a little bit harder to cut. It's a little bit thicker than the other glasses, and I kind of have to bring it out instead of going into the groove, just right in front of it. Still using that groove to still center this glass, but it just takes a little bit more finesse. It's a little bit of a learning curve to get them whenever they're just a little bit too big. You know, the thickness of the glass is just a little bit more than is intended from the foiler. And there you have it. Piece number 2. We'll go ahead and set it with our other piece. And we will continue to see how this one just goes right into that groove with no problem. But that other piece that was a little bit harder, see, this one goes right into that groove. The other one was just a little bit too thick. And Ella asked if this foiler is for 7/30 seconds, and it is. I think there is a 7/30 seconds, quarter, and 3/16. Just folding it all over. And then on these curves, I like to sort of just slowly with my finger kind of fold it over. And if you kind of go back and forth, it'll have a little bit of friction, heating up that foil just a little bit, not a lot. And I think it helps it from tearing. See, I've got no tears there. I I think that if you go back and forth with that little bit of that friction, heating it up, helps to keep it from tearing. And that might be some, you know, something I made up, but I still like to say it because I think it might be true. There we go. And I used to use scissors to cut the foil. Then I started using some lead dikes because, I don't know, they just work better. The scissors, they seem to get, you know, they can get sticky. You have to kind of open them, whereas the lead dikes, they've got this spring here, and it keeps them open. You know, it opens automatically. So then it's just ready to cut the next piece. And really any sort of side cutter or, you know, even I think like a wire cutter might even work if you've got one already. There we go. All right, that one's ready to burnish. All right. There we have it. The last of this one to foil. And even when we're done, we are going to keep this foil out just in case we need to do a little repair. Because more times than not, you might knock off a little bit of foil during the burnishing process. And we will need to fix that. And I'm just really surprised we haven't had a single tear yet in this foil from this curve. So that, I'm going to say that's more luck than anything. Or maybe I'm just that good. I don't know. Just getting probably a little bit lucky with this today. If it does break for you, it's not a big deal. Just put a little repair on there. I'm sure we'll be seeing that here shortly. And Ella mentioned that she uses a little paintbrush like a chopstick size and rub it in the curve, and mentioned that that might, it's supposed to warm up the foil and stretches a little so it doesn't tear when burnishing. Yeah, that makes sense. And it's probably not a bad idea to use something that's not your finger in case you cut your finger on that glass. You know, it's kind of putting a lot of pressure. I really haven't had a problem, especially because we grind everything down. And then, you know, you have a nice edge, so that works out pretty good. And Ice Queen, thank you for joining us. Looks like you're looking to get back into stained glass. And yeah, you should. It's always a good time, and we've got a pretty good community. Sometimes, you know, if you don't have a good group of people to interact with about the art, it can become a little bit daunting. And so that's what we've got the Stained Glass Mastery community for. So if you're interested in joining that, be sure to leave a link here that you can check that out too. There we go. And we are on to the last color, the white glass that we used for the little wrapper. And the wrapper, not like, what's that guy's name? Eminem? Not like that wrapper. The wrapper around the candy. Plastic wrapper. There we go. Works out really well every time. Just about every time. Occasionally you have to do a little redo here and there, but not too bad. And I really like these colors. The sort of pale purple. It's kind of a nice glass. I'm not too familiar with it. I haven't used it a whole lot myself. We will be using it a little bit in the shell for next week also. Kind of has that seashell color to me. And of course, if you did purchase the kit, you can change up the colors. You know, if you wanted to do a different color candy here. We've got the gray and white glass from the Husky that you can use. We've got the red, of course, we used, white, and that purplish glass. And these pieces really just go right in. There we go. Oops, I got this little thing right there. And Ella mentioned that people in some of the Facebook groups that she won't mention are critical and sometimes rude. Oh, wow. So far I haven't experienced that in your community group. Oh, that's good, Ella. I'm glad. Yeah, I'd be surprised if anyone, you know, acted such a way. Pretty good group. Had the winners the winners of the monthly giveaway. All three of them gave away their prizes to the next runner-up. So that was, you know, their gift cards. So that was very kind of them. It's a really good group we've got going there. There we go. There we go. And you can see if we did not clean this glass very well, this foil would not be sticking. So make sure not to take any shortcuts there. That is an important part. If you're going to spend your time and money on the glass and cutting it and getting it this far, you might as well clean it up nicely. All right. And we've got one last piece to apply the foil here. And then we will move on to the burnishing. There we go. Okay. Got the last piece with the foil applied. Now we are going to keep this out like I mentioned. And here is all of the foil we used. So pretty good amount there in that short amount of time. So again, that foiler really makes quick work. Well, we are going to keep this just barely to the side here. Make sure to sweep this off. I don't want to be cutting myself. And we are going to get to burnishing. So we've got all of our pieces here. As I burnish them, I think I'm going to go ahead and place them onto our pattern. And we do not need the glass cutting tools anymore. We're going to go ahead and put that to the side. All right. Let's see, a good spot would probably be right here. So we'll burnish, and what I like to do is start with the edges. And that will keep any air gaps from getting into the in between the foil if you do both faces first, which would just leave room for flux or other contaminants to go and disrupt the adhesion. And Homemade mentioned or asked that, or mentioned that they would like to start selling their art and wondering the best place to start. Well, I would probably start something like Etsy. Would probably be my first place to start. You could get a website on Shopify or on Squarespace, one of those kind of simple web builders. You could do craft shows. You could do some places, some cities might have a sort of resale place that it's like a consignment where you place your items there and then you share the commission of the sale. So there's a few options for you. Probably the easiest and quickest to get up and running would be Etsy, I think. And of course you can run ads or make videos to get some attention to your products and maybe get some sales that way. All right, so we got our first piece all burnished here. So we're going to place that down. Where do you go? No, you don't go there. I think you go right there. Right there, first piece. Almost ready to start soldering. And Cindy mentioned that the group should be one of positive reinforcement, friendly suggestion, not criticism. It's art, not a graded test. What is pretty to one may not be someone else's cup of tea. And that is true. That is sort of the cornerstone of art, that it's sort of in the eyes of the beholder. And I'm pretty surprised that people are sort of negative in such a way on in a public forum. I guess it's to be expected with the internet in general. There's always going to be something going on. I know especially Reddit can be an interesting place, sort of a wild, wild west. So probably definitely has some good, helpful resources, and I guarantee the vast majority of the people on Reddit are very kind people too. Okay, now these are a little bit different now that I look at it. This one has a little bit of a thinner point, and the other one has got a little bit of a thicker, broader point. See that? So these are not exactly the same. This one's a little bit of a wider point. That one goes on this side. So you are going to have to make sure to put the right one on the right side here. Just want to take your time, not push too hard here. You will start to tear that foil. It's not like a really thick, super durable item. It is a very thin foil. So you want it to be pretty strong, but not so hard that you're going to be tearing it. And Ella mentioned that she sews and makes quilts, and there are ladies that are rude in those groups also, and they call them the quilt police. That's funny. Just like the Gap police. And that's true, yeah. If it does look perfect, it doesn't look handmade. That is true. Looks like a machine did it. There we go. And we've got our first part of the center candy. I think that's about right there. And I have noticed it's pretty common. People who do stained glass, they do a lot of different crafts. I'd be interested to know what other crafts people are doing. And even I'd be interested to know as to why you got getting into stained glass in the first place. Because right now I'm trying to get as many people into the stained glass craft as possible. Wondering what might be some compelling reasons to, join up, other than, of course, the stress outlet and creative outlet. Kind of a relaxing thing to do, and of course to create art. Create any art that you want, really. Got our next red piece, making sure to alternate which one goes where. And I want to make sure that I put these in the right spot, more or less. There we go. I can go ahead and switch back to one of the other purple white glosses. And the burnishing, it's a lot of kind of the same thing. You're just smoothing that foil into the face of that glass. I like to use this fid because it's got kind of this point here on the end. It's not too rounded. And you can get into heavily textured areas. And that is pretty useful whenever you are working with a not smooth glass. Here we're working with all pretty much smooth glasses, so it's not a big deal. But sometimes that is not the case. It is not the case. All right, let's see how we're looking here. Oops, that one doesn't go there. Let's see. There we go. Had it on the wrong side. And occasionally we have to take our X-Acto blade and do little fine adjustments in case some of the foil that overlapped the other foil maybe wasn't quite perfect. I'll have to go through and cut that down. Just a slight adjustment here and there. Anywhere that foil is, that solder will follow. So you want to make sure that foil is looking really good, because that's going to pretty much be where the finished solder attaches to. And it'll just flow right to that spot. And the kind of copper, shiny copper finish looks really good. And here in just a second, we'll get a pretty good idea of what this finished product is going to kind of look like, since we are almost done here with the burnishing. It'll be just about time to solder. And I like to use lead-free solder. And I use a 100-watt soldering iron from Weller normally. And it's a pretty good iron. Works pretty well. I don't have any problems with it, really. The little Hakko iron with the temperature control is a little bit too cold. Doesn't get hot enough for the lead-free solder. So that's why I stick with the Weller, or else I would use the Hakko. It's just a little bit underpowered for what I need with the lead-free. And if you don't use lead-free, then the Hakko will work pretty much just fine. And Ella mentioned that she does the embroidery shirts, tumblers, but always loved church windows and was fascinated by it. And so that's why kind of getting into that stainless. Okay, that's an interesting idea. So it's possible you're just so familiar with them in church windows for such a long time, and then something sort of happens that demystifies it for you a little bit, and then you decide, hey, you know, I can do that too, and you start kind of making windows. That's cool. That's interesting. Wonder if a lot of people have sort of a similar shared experience with how they got started. And we're looking pretty good here. Just want to try to get this as close as we can. And I do think that some of these pieces are actually a little bit different. Yeah, they might not be perfect circles, so you might have to do a little bit of trial and error to make sure that this is going to be the perfect fit based on the piece that you've got there. I have to swap a few around. I had to swap just one piece around, and I think it's looking pretty good now. I've got a few more here to burnish down. There we go. Got our next piece. Oops, that one doesn't go there. I think it goes on the other side. There we go. And that looks like a tasty candy there. There we go. A little bit of trim on the X-Acto blade. And ready for solder. I think you go on the other side. Do you? Yes, you do. And we've got one more piece, the last piece to burnish. And we are ready for soldering. So I am going to go ahead and turn the soldering iron on, start to get that all heated up. There we go. All right, we did it. So now we're going to arrange these a little bit further and try to really get everything the way we want it. We're going to tack in all the joints here. There we go. So I think that looks pretty good. We can go through and take a quick look here on the free camera. So here it is. We've got our little wrapper here, and we've got all of our pieces cut and ready for the, going to go ahead and put a little bit of flux on these joints here, especially right in the middle. I want to really solidify that. And then we're going to see how strong it is with just a little bit of solder here. Let me go ahead and adjust this downward. We'll have a really good view here of what is going on. Okay, so I like to keep my flux inside of this little container here. And I'm going to go ahead and put some gloves on. I'm going to put some gloves on, and I'm going to get the fume extractor. Oops. I'm going to get the fume extractor going right here. Get all of that stuff out of here once that soldering iron starts to burn it up. Okay, let's get this over to the right spot. Let's see here. There we go, that should do. And we are going to go ahead and dab this with a little bit of flux, just like this. And I used to put some nails, but in putting the nails, you kind of have to hammer them in. And if you hammer them in, you're really disturbing the glass. So I have to keep setting it up. You know, you kind of nail in a nail, set it back up, nail in a nail. So this way, we can just put the pieces in the right configuration, and then we can tack them in a few little areas, and it'll be holding strong. So what I like to do, if my iron has a bunch of junk on here like this, I just wire brush that thing off, just like that. Ta-da! Now let's see if this thing is getting nice and hot. Oh yeah, it's there. So, we're going to get this right in the center first. There we go. That should hold. Get a little bit out here. All right. And that should pretty much hold us together. So we can remove our little pattern. Sometimes the heat will start to stick to the little pattern underneath. There we have it, just as little joints tacked together. We're holding good. So now I am going to go ahead and also grab my heat resistant gloves and get these on. So we can really douse this in flux now that it is completely, you know, tacked together adequately. And we're going to go ahead and tin the perimeters. We're going to get solder on this side, and it's not going to be the finished bead of solder, it's just mostly the initial soldering. There we go. Go ahead and put a fair amount of solder down. And what I like to do is kind of feed the solder from the top, and as you move the iron, it sort of runs from the top to the bottom. And this will at least get us a good start. And then we're going to go back and kind of do the other side, do some edge beading, and then come back and do a nice finished bead here. So we're also tinning the perimeter. Tinning is when you essentially just coat the surface in solder. And this I find to be the best way to get the best finish, because this is our viewing side. We want to make sure the viewing side is the best looking, since we'll be seeing it from that side. And what that means is we're also going to be putting the hook that it hangs on the other side. And we still want to kind of disguise it as much as possible, but it's, you know, it's not going to be the side we're looking at the most, so we're not as worried about that. Okay, so this side is good for the moment. We're going to flip it, and we are going to do a lot of solder on this side. So we're going to put a lot of flex down. Make sure we don't get all tangled up here. And Ella asked if the end pieces need to be reinforced with wire. And personally, for a small panel like this, I would say no. Now, the other thing is that I plan to hang this sort of from one of these joints, so it won't have a lot of pressure way out here, you know, where it's sort of putting stress on that joint. The only stress will be the weight of the white glass. So that's not too bad. So for that reason, I would say we do not need to put the reinforcing for such a small area. And if you were going to reinforce it, you could put a little wire through here along this curve and then back up. And then that way it will have a, you know, it'll have weight distribution throughout the entire panel instead of the local area right next to it. So what I like to do is first get some solder down, and we can go back and correct any of the areas that are less than ideal looking. And of course we are going to make sure everything is tinned nicely. And if you do get little solder droplets onto your work surface, leave them there. Don't try to reuse them because they're going to get a lot of burn marks all into your solder from the wood or any other impurities that might have picked up. So if you are trying to round these out, sometimes you can tap it through, sort of keeping a wet edge. And if there's enough solder, it will just round out. And if there's not enough solder, it'll probably fall flat, in which case you're going to want to add just a little bit of solder. And this is going to be a little bit tricky. There's so many runs of solder from the center. It's going to be pretty much impossible to keep it a wet edge. So we'll do our best with this spot, trying to keep it a wet edge so we can continue this bead all the way through. And right here's a spot we might need to add a little bit of solder. You can see it's kind of flattening out. All right. So this side is pretty much good. I'll probably try to smooth this out a little bit more. Now we do want to hang it still. I think we're going to do it from a joint like this. Oh yeah, and Ella mentioned that she tries to, whenever she reinforces it, she'll do it sort of on the sides and the end. And yeah, you'll really see it. You know, that's the only problem with that. So it is good to try to hide it on that opposite of the viewing side. And while we are on this, I think that we can go ahead and make our jump ring here. So we'll snip this down. This is way bigger than we're going to need. And I think what we're going to do is I like to just do a little bit of a braided wire here. Something like this. And I just like to twist this thing. So we have a nice reinforced wire here to submerge in the solder. And normally I'll hold this with the glass grosiers because it gets really hot really quickly. Even with these little, it might work out with these heat resistant gloves. Now let's see here. This is our backside. So I think we're going to want to hang it something like this. Yeah, so it'll have a little bit of an angle to the hanging. So we're going to go ahead and tack this in with our wire we just made. And so we're going to put a little bit of flux here. Now we do need for this to really be in the right spot. So I am going to go ahead and hold it with the pliers here so I don't burn myself. And we're going to try to submerge this into that spot. So we're going to heat it up. I see something going on. Oops. Okay, so this is sinking in there pretty good. So that's good right there. And now we can do the same with towards the bottom. And sometimes you might have to kind of move it around with the pliers, make sure it's in the spot you want it. Just like that. And then we can, what I'm going to do in this case is sort of put this downward. I'm going to end up snipping this, but this will, because I want this to be as hidden as possible. So I'm going to try to push it down into the solder as much as I can. And I even might just go ahead and snip this off. Take off that excess. And then I'm going to try to just push that down into the solder. I'm going to angle it with the pliers first. There we go. And now I can heat it up and submerge it a little bit further. I'm just going to leave it on there for a moment, let it heat up that wire. It'll kind of transfer the heat into the solder, just like that. And then it submerges nicely. And we're going to go ahead and pile up a little bit more solder here. We want to try to hide that wire as much as we can. And to reinforce it as much as we can. And that's pretty good right there. We're not going to have any problems with that. So now we can go through and do some edge beading. So what that entails is you kind of stand it up like this. And I'm going to readjust this so that you can see what we're doing. There we go. That should work. I'm going to angle this upward a little bit. I might even stack this on top of something. There we go. Now it'll be right where we're working. And what I like to do, just take some flux. Oh, first, you need to kind of angle your solder in a way you can grab it with your iron. So just angle it upward. Go ahead and take your flux, and I'm going to go ahead and flux the entire perimeter just so it's ready to go when we are. And we might have to add a little bit more, but this will be a good start. So now we are going to grab our iron, grab a little bit of solder just like this, and we're just wanting to tap this all the way around. Make sure it's got a nice bead, rounded bead on the perimeter. And of course, feel free to add any sort of decorative solder. One of these days we'll have to try something out. There we go. And you're just kind of rotating the piece to use gravity as you're able to. Kind of working back and forth, just trying to get the gravity. Keep that bead from running off. So we got a spot right here we didn't do. And normally you're going to be able to tell pretty easily which spots you haven't done because they'll look kind of coppery versus that silvery solder look. There we go. Continuing on. So slow and steady here, just focusing on making sure everything is all nice and rounded, nicely coated. And then we're going to be going back and taking care of the viewing side. Make sure that everything looks exactly the way we want it. And I think we're pretty much back where we started. So now we are going to go onto the viewing side and fix this up to where we like it. So I want to start by adding solder to the areas that are very flat and sunken in, just like this. Oop, you get some bubbles there. Try to get all that out. There we go. A little bit bubbly. Probably some flux getting in there. Tapping that wet edge into wet edge. And a lot of this is looking good. A few areas looking a little bit rough need to be addressed, but a lot of it is looking really good already from our first round. And we're just right here at the tail end of this video. We're going to go ahead and clean this up, get it all patinaed, doing the black patina. And that will be the last of the candy for week 3. So now let's go ahead and clean this up nicely. Use our trusty rag here. Just going to put some blue glass cleaner, nothing special, nothing fancy. Wipe this all down. Try to get all that flux off there. Any of that excess solder, sometimes it splatters and sticks to the glass a little bit. And it's coming out very nicely so far. I'm going to go ahead and actually sweep this thing, or get all these little solder drips everywhere. There we go. Oops, and we've got a little bit of a drip right here that we're going to want to take care of. See that? Take this, and with the gravity, it'll just pop right off. See if we can level this out a little bit better. If not, we're just going to drip that one off too. There we go. That looks good. This is sort of the final quality check here before we do the patina and kind of the final cleaning wipe down. So there we go, got this all cleaned up. We're going to go ahead and grab our black patina. And this is an acid, so I'm going to go ahead and take these off, but keep my blue gloves on. We'll just saturate that rag just like that, and kind of just start to apply it on there. And kind of have to keep reapplying it. Make sure it is heavily coated with this liquid, and it will become the black finish. And if you keep kind of going over it, recoating it, it'll have a little bit more of a more consistent, darker finish. And got that first side. Now we'll go back to the other side. Start to apply here. There we go. And now we need to just do the final cleaning here. And we will go through and do a nice scrub down here. One more on the last side. All right. Oops. And with that, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a little hard to see. Let's see if we can get it maybe a little bit better color over here. Maybe a better color on our free camera. And with that, everyone, I do appreciate you joining us today for the week 3 candy of the May stained glass kit. So again, thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy it, be sure to check out the Stained Glass Mastery community, where we have tons of free resources, a great community of other artists to help support you, answer questions, you can share projects, and much more. So again, thank you so much for watching. We will see you in the next one. Goodbye.